What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's podcast. There's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. First up, the developer Cave is now releasing a new game on the exA-Arcadia arcade platform, and Cave is known for making really high-quality shooters, and that's exactly what this game is. For anybody that doesn't know, the exA-Arcadia platform is kind of like a modern arcade platform, and it's really just meant to replace things like the later model Neo Geo platforms that could be run on 31 kilohertz systems, so you could use a CRT. I assume most people would probably just use some kind of 480p compatible monitor, but it is a true arcade platform that looks PC based, and it's kind of neat. Part of the things about being on that platform is that each release has to have some kind of exclusivity for that release of it. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be a whole other game, but there has to be something different about it to kind of draw people in. So I'm pretty interested to see what this is going to turn out to be. I don't think there were any details yet on exactly what the differences are, but the fact that we're still getting new shooters from a company that's been known to make awesome ones is a pretty great thing. So hopefully I'll be able to try one of these out in person someday. Modern Vintage Gamer recently put out a video that showed why the PlayStation 1 games have that kind of wobble to them, which is also another side effect of that is why it was a little bit sharper than the N64. As always, I don't want to spoil the video because it was pretty awesome, but there was one scene in there that I extracted and stole from, sorry MVG, but that I thought was a really great representation about how things like the N64 and PlayStation differed in the way that they rendered their 3D graphics. So you could see the PlayStation version of Mega Man here is fairly sharp, while you move over to the N64 and it's kind of softer. And, you know, stuff like this really makes me appreciate the N64's graphics even more, because while many of us now are used to trying to play these older games on more modern solutions, whether it's scaled to 4K or whether it's even just a really sharp calibrated BVM, it's very easy to forget the main target monitors and displays that were used back then. And the more I kind of look at the N64, the more I realize they made the right choice for people gaming on the monitors that they were gaming on. I think, you know, the softer graphics and the way they were blended really kind of allow them to fake it being higher resolution than it actually is. It's kind of hard to say without seeing it and playing it in person. I think the point that really drove that home for me was the Rad2X's smoothing filter, because while of course, you know, the RetroTINK products already had that filter, I didn't really spend too much time with it until I was working on the Rad2X videos. And while I kind of knew that it made 3D graphics smoother and better, it was really once I was doing the N64 testing that I realized how good it could actually look with just basic 480p scaling and the smoothing filter on it, and then letting your TV scale it, the rest of the image, to the flat panels display. So it kind of, you know, weirdly enough, the softer, where I'm normally chasing a sharpest image possible, the softer image on the N64 seems to do better if you stick with it from that mentality. So totally off topic from what I was just talking about here, but I thought I would make the point because I found it pretty interesting myself, both in my own testing and in Modern Vintage Gamer's video. So definitely check it out if you're interested in how these graphics work and why they're different. The Firmware optical drive emulator for the Sega Saturn has just got a price and release date. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly. And it looks like 8-bit mods will be the ones selling them. I think they're doing a small batch now that looks like it's probably already sold out, but this is going to be followed by a run of 500 or more coming very soon. So while you should check 8-bit Mod's store to see if they're still in stock now, I would really expect the larger batch to be where everybody is able to get theirs, which is kind of cool because now it's almost like another wave of beta testers. They've already had beta testing and there's a very good compatibility list for this, but you know, I kind of appreciate when people roll things out this way. That way, if there are any issues or anything that needs to be addressed in a firmware update, you know, only that initial batch of early adopters has to worry about it, and by the time the large batch gets made, everybody kind of has a solid version. So I think it's totally cool with that. The price is $96 US though, which is pretty awesome. You know, about €100, 96 USD, whatever the exchange rate is today. So that's a really affordable price, especially because, you know, if you consider how quickly a lot of these CD-ROM drive assemblies are starting to die and how expensive it's going to get to replace all of these, having something that both preserves the console and potentially has faster loading times, easier to get your games on there, you know, I always appreciate that a lot. And even recently when I was shooting the last video that involved the Saturn, my Saturn's drive just stopped working. So it was kind of a little finicky, but now it just won't even read original discs anymore. So perfect time for me to upgrade, I guess. So I'll be getting one of these in and hopefully be able to do an installation guide and review pretty much immediately. Although they did post an installation on Twitter. And it was quite literally, you unplug the CD drive and plug this in its place. It's got to be about one of the easiest things to install imaginable. But I'll show it anyway, and I'll just show it in action and hopefully do some loading time testing. Maybe I could borrow another a working Saturn with a good optical drive and do some loading tests and stuff like that. But I'm definitely excited to try it out. And once I get it in, I think the first game I'm excited to play through start to finish is the English translation of Linkle Liver Story. Beast hooked me up with his self-patched copy from the disc that he had, so I'm really interested to see how that game plays, because I played Crusader of Senti, and I know everybody's probably gonna get pissed that I say this, but I didn't love it. I thought for a game that came out quite a few years after A Link to the Past, they could have done a much better job polishing it up and getting some of the things wrong. They could have gotten things a little bit better in that. So hopefully they did with this one. We'll see. But anyway, I'm excited for this ODE, and I'll have more info on it soon. So here's something that I'm personally very excited about. The CPSHDMI project from Marcus, the same creator of the open source scan converter, has just gotten a firmware update that adds a bunch of different resolutions to it. And I think this is super important because this covers a bunch of different use cases. And I'll explain it pretty quickly, but also keep in mind the target group for this. So anybody that installs an HDMI kit in their CPS2 arcade board is not somebody that is afraid to go and add different adapters to things, and they're generally people that either do some kind of live stream, work in fighting game events, or just a giant arcade enthusiast and want a bunch of options. So while your average retro gamer might not go this far, if you do include this in your setup, you'd be pretty excited about this as well. So first, it includes a bunch of different resolutions now: 1440p, 1200p, 1080p 4x and 5x, 720p, and then two modes that are really designed for CRT use, which I'll get back to in a second. So the main flat screen resolutions are exactly what you'd expect. They're meant to fill the exact target resolution of whatever monitor that you're using, because there are some really good super low lag computer monitors out there that's averaging just a few milliseconds of latency that would be much easier to carry around to arcade tournaments than big BVMs and PDMs. And while I appreciate the people that do that, I think events that are stationed, big events obviously bring all the good stuff, or events that have places that have this stuff in already as part of their arsenal, great. But if you're doing like quick single day events at a hotel or something like that, it'd be way easier to just bring a bunch of low lag flat screens and plug this right in order to use. It's a digital to digital mod. There is no lag added. So it really is the perfect way really to play original arcade hardware on flat screens with good compatibility. The other modes are stuff I'm really excited about, though, because many people out there don't have the ability to find or repair an RGB monitor. But you could find PC VGA monitors, at least around here, you could still find them very cheap and very easily. So anybody that wants an at-home CRT experience could now buy just any VGA monitor, set this to 480p mode, and then use just a very cheap HDMI to VGA converter. And through that, you get yourself a really good 480p image. And this version of the firmware does not have scan lines built in. However, Marcus is still working on a menu for it, so I'm sure those will be added back in. And using 480p output with scan lines on a VGA monitor will get you something that looks really, really close to an RGB monitor in 240p. I'll have a whole video on this, hopefully by the end of the summer. I have other stuff I want to do first that would make sense to go first, but I think when people see the comparisons, they'll be pretty impressed. And lastly, one of the resolutions outputted is it's nicknamed Super Resolution 1536 by 224, which is essentially a way of getting 240p out of HDMI that's an easier way to do it for most target equipment. And when I tested this, I tested it with both an HDMI to component video converter and an HDMI to VGA converter, and then through a sync combiner, of course. And I was able to get a perfect image on a CRT monitor. So Whether it was component, which you could use on any consumer grade TV that you find with component inputs, or RGB, so VGA and combining sync, you could essentially have yourself a really clear 240p output that's meant for CRTs without a supergun. You just need one of those cheap I/O boards that we talked about a while back. So that's pretty exciting to me, and it's also cool because if you find a splitter that's compatible, which I forgot to test mine, but I'm pretty sure your average splitter may or may not work because of it's that odd resolution, you still have at least the potential to be able to do something like send one of those HDMI signals to your capture card, which then of course you'd have to squish back in and reframe, and then the other to a CRT. Now, obviously, a better option would probably be just using a supergun to go to a CRT and HDMI out going into your capture. However, like I said earlier, a lot of people that use these have very specific use cases that they need solutions for. So the fact that we have all of these different options now is really, really exciting. There's going to be some more stuff coming out for CPS2 this year that I think would go nicely with it. And I'm just overall really excited that Marcus took the time to do all this. I believe there are compatible files for the CPS1 and 3 HDMI. I haven't tested those yet. And I'm definitely going to be doing a video about this once the next firmware with the menu is released, both because it'll give me some more time to borrow some equipment and because I'll be able to show off all of its features as good as I can. So thanks so much to Marcus for everything. The RetroTINK Ultimate Raspberry Pi hat is now back, sort of. So a while back, Mike Chi said that he was no longer going to be selling the RetroTINK Ultimate, which is one of the many very high-quality Raspberry Pi hats that allow you to get direct analog video out. Part of this was just lack of interest compared to the other products that Mike sells, as well as the fact that if you're just looking to go from, say, HDMI to component video, you could take a Raspberry Pi without any hat on it and just buy a cheap $20 connector and go from there. The RetroTINK Ultimate specifically has some pretty awesome options for multiple outputs, so you could do S-video and component video output at the same time, and it's, I think, the only hat that offers S-video output as well. So while it was pretty sad that this was going away and it wasn't going to be sold anymore, Mike did make the design freeware for people to make, and Ryan from Castlemania stepped up and did just that. Of course, he, as usual, contacted Mike and made sure this was cool. There was nothing wrong with just taking a freeware design and selling it, but it's pretty cool that people are taking the time just to have nice etiquette for this stuff. But yeah, Ryan's doing a pre-order now for anybody that still wants to buy these, and I think he'll probably keep stock of these for a little bit while longer. And to be honest, I mean, depending on your setup, this may or may not be the best Raspberry Pi hat for you. If you're just using a consumer grade TV and need component video, using one of those cheap HDMI converters and super resolution is probably the easiest thing for you to do. However, if you want a SCART option, the RGB Pi is still a really great solution, one of my favorites. There's JAMA options out there as well, and the TINK Ultimate really takes care of people that want multiple outputs, as well as the only one that does S-video, or I guess really component video directly. So I need to update my whole Raspberry Pi hardware video, because while all of it still completely stands today, there's a few other options, including one that we talked about a few weeks ago. And I would like to spend a few minutes just putting everything into a little better perspective of how to set up your Raspberry Pi gaming today. But for now, if you know that you already want the Raspberry Pi hat, the RetroTINK Ultimate, definitely pre-order from Castlemania. Links, of course, are all right in the post. And if you were holding out for a SCART solution or something else, you could still do SCART with this. You would just need a custom VGA to SCART cable, same exact one you would use on the Mister. But there could be different options for different people's setups. So I'm just happy this one's being made available again, because in some cases, it really would be the best option for people. An unreleased N64 game was just found and dumped called Viewpoint 2064, which is a sequel to the Neo Geo game Viewpoint. And it's a pretty cool 3D looking Star Fox-esque shooter, something that you would kind of expect to see on the N64. And apparently the game was completed but then canceled, so that this game is actually, a completed game that it's fully playable, and it looks exactly like what you would expect out of a quality N64 shooter. So anybody that's interested in these, definitely give it a shot. For me personally, I always enjoy experiencing a game that almost was but was canceled. So for me, I'm definitely going to fire up my EverDrive and give this thing a shot just for the heck of it. But it does seem to be a pretty decent shooter. I guess there was conflicting opinions on whether it was good or not, but I would just suggest giving it a try for yourself as long as you have the ability to play N64 ROMs. Analogue has started shipping out the replacements for the Game Gear cartridge adapters for the Mega SG, and I received mine, and it looks to be quite a bit different from the original. Differences are the original has through-hole components in a totally different layout than the newer ones, which use surface mount components. So while Analogue hasn't actually published any reasons or any description as to what the problem was, they do suggest that you just throw out the old one and only use the new one. I, of course, being a nerd, is going to hold on to mine. And also there's pads on the back of both the old and new version that match exactly, that there hasn't been any official documentation about. So, I'll look into this and see if there's anything useful that could be done with it. But as far as I know, there's nothing that these the cartridge adapters can't play, so it's not like you're going to lose functionality of a game without whatever was on the back. Probably it's something to do with accessories, so I'll try to do a follow-up post on that and see if it's something that anybody could take advantage of. And also I'll try to see if Analogue would release any official statement as to what the problem was. I don't understand why they're so secretive about this, because if it's something that has to do with design engineering, they've already gone above and beyond to get people replacements. I mean, I received a replacement in the middle of all the craziness that's going on right now, so they obviously, at least in my opinion, should be commended for this pretty awesome recall, how quickly they were able to step up for this. I just wish, they would release a statement saying, hey, here's the problem, and by the way, if you're looking to design products, you might run into this as well, so, here you go. But, whatever. They're certainly not obligated to explain anything, and I do want to mention one more time that they've been awesome about this replacement, so certainly no hate thrown their way, just curiosity, I guess. Ray Comment just posted a full review of the new NES game Trophy that I believe I spoke about a few weeks ago that I saw at PAX, and he really did a great job breaking down the game, the things that he thought were positives and a few negatives about it, but overall felt it was a really awesome brand new NES game, and that's exactly the way I felt when I played it. Now, I certainly didn't put the time into it that Ray did. I only played it kind of hanging out at the show, but it felt like a really good NES game. So if you're interested in this stuff at all, like I said before, I highly recommend at the very least checking out Ray's video, but even looking into the ROM and potentially buying that as well. I think it should be available relatively soon, both as a ROM and on Steam. And I don't know if their cartridges are still available for sale. Check out their Kickstarter page. That might be over by now, but hopefully they'll still make the cartridges available for purchase elsewhere even afterwards, because I even was impressed by those as well. I liked the clear cartridge shell. They were using high quality PCBs inside. So overall, in my opinion, the game was a win in all aspects. And, while no game could really be considered perfect, I guess, I think the criticism that Ray had about it was totally fair and certainly not something that would stop most people from buying the game. But anyway, please check it out if you're interested. I just released a video that compared the Sega Nomad upgrade replacement boards, the LCD driver and the RGB driver. And with these, you use the same LCD screen, but each is a different way to transcode the RGB signal over to what the LCD panel could understand. And the original LCD driver was awesome. It was super sharp, but it shimmered whenever there was motion on the screen, which some people don't care about, some people that drives them crazy. So it was a bit of to each their own scenario. And the same place that made that now came out with the RGB driver, which is a similar board, but has a bunch more options, different ways to set phase, set the brightness, really great ways to configure it. But and the shimmering is gone, but it's not nearly as sharp, and I did get some weird interference in mine. So while neither are bad solutions, neither are perfect solutions either, and if you want a Nomad screen upgrade right now, watch the video and decide which board is better for you. Or if you're patient and you just want to wait, hopefully other people will be able to come out with these, not just to fix the issues, but also the company that makes them refuses to sell out of Japan. And I try not to judge with stuff like this because, I don't know what the rules are are. I don't know if there's different tax brackets or different things you got to deal with over there. So I'm certainly not trying to judge about that, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a giant pain in the ass for anybody else around the world to try to get these boards. I was lucky enough to have friends who have contacts in Japan get it for me, so thank you all very much. I appreciate that. You could also get it through some services like ShipJP and Tenzo that will buy these for you and then ship it to them, and then they ship it to the US for a fee, of course. So, hopefully somebody will work on a solution that kind of is the best of both that's available worldwide, because I think that would be the perfect solution for Nomad owners. However, I believe it's going to be the same LCD screen no matter what you do. So if you wanted to upgrade this now and then change the board out later, it wouldn't be nearly as much work as doing this from scratch. And also don't forget, Mobius has that really awesome triple bypass board specifically designed for the Nomad, which if you're going to upgrade, if you use video output, audio video output of the Nomad, definitely consider the triple bypass. If you only play on the internal speaker, it's still an upgrade, but I don't know if you would really notice. I think maybe just an LCD screen and a speaker update might be better, but definitely at least take a look at the triple bypass option and see if it fits your gaming needs best. And like I said in the video and in my other Nomad videos, it's my personal opinion that if you own a Nomad because you're a collector and you want a very awesome piece of history, just enjoy the Nomad's original screen for as awful as it is, and mostly just keep it in the box. But if you're somebody who uses the Nomad, do any screen update, even a composite video one, anything, because not only is it clearer than the original, but you get a lot more battery life. My Nomad's become an essential piece of testing equipment in my setup nowadays, so I'm really happy that I have it, and I'm happy that I have it triple bypassed, so I know that all the levels coming out are even, which makes my testing even easier. So thanks to everybody who helped with it, people who helped with the adapter boards and everything else. So I think the video came out okay, and hopefully it answers any questions people have about the differences between them. Over the past few weeks, people have been talking about different rumors around the Analogue trademark name Analogue 8. And I guess about last year around this time, people had discovered that Analogue had trademarked the name Analogue Pocket and Analogue 8. Now, Analogue Pocket has obviously already been announced and will probably ship sometime this year still, but there was no announcements about anything around the Analogue 8. And they let their trademark lapse, and now it's, I guess, considered abandoned. But I think the important point to realize is this doesn't necessarily mean anything. Alex did a good job laying all this out in the article, but having an abandoned trademark on something, you could always just renew it. Maybe it's just a name change. There's a lot of things people have been speculating about. Maybe their rerun of the NT Mini takes the place of this and they're not doing this at all. Maybe this is delayed. You could speculate all day long. The only thing that I would offer into all this is having the abandoned trademark may or may not mean anything at all. And if anybody was looking for a really good FPGA NES right now, the AVS from RetroUSB plays Nintendo and Famicom cartridges, outputs 720p HDMI, and has been really, really awesome. I have zero complaints about it. There's a few features Brian talked about that I hoped that he would add at some point, but honestly, it's a great, solid way to play NES games over HDMI. Zero lag, very accurate emulation. So if you are holding your breath for an analog version, don't forget that there's already a perfectly good solution out there already. But I am still interested to see what Analogue would come out with. I would love to see like Kevtris's version of the Super NT, but plays NES and Famicom cartridges. But I guess we'll find out eventually. And don't take too much stock into this stuff. But it was fun to see some of the speculation and some of the thoughts people had. Mike Chi has just released a few open source designs for VGA to SCART sync combiners, but I want to make sure I'm very clear about what this is, because those terms can be very easily confused. So the purpose of this device is to take audio left and right, as well as RGB video signals, and pass those through from those connectors to a SCART connector without touching any of those signals at all. Those are just passed through to make sure that it goes from one to the other. Then it takes sync from the VGA port and either passes direct C-sync through or combines horizontal and vertical sync to C-sync in order to be compatible with SCART, which is RGBS. So this does not change the video signal. It's not a 480p to 240p converter. It's just a pass-through device. And there's a few things about this. So it's open source, but Mike does not plan on making these. I think he's just kind of making a few to test and then hoping other people will make them. I don't believe any have been made yet, so we still need to test them, and I'll of course do a follow-up just to see. But the board is powered off of the voltage pin that's part of the VGA standard. So it should work with Mister. That depends on your I/O board, I guess. It also should work with any of the powered devices like HDMI to VGA converters. That should be no problem, which means this would be a perfect use for things like the CPSHDMI for people that want to go from HDMI to VGA to SCART. So I guess we'll have to look into that. Otherwise, we'd have to make some kind of other power port for it. Or I guess add a passive sync combiner, which works in some scenarios and not others. Steve from HD Retrovision wrote a really good article about that, which I talked about a few months ago, I believe. The other thing about this is I would really love to see a version of this that has a plug-style SCART connector. This uses a standard SCART receptacle, which means that now you're also going to need a SCART cable to go from this into your device. And the reason Mike designed it with this is because, quite simply, there is no plug-style SCART connector that is surface mount right angle like these ones are. So you would have to use ones that were designed for inside the SCART cable. So, Mike used pretty small components in this, so I think this is something that might be able to be repurposed onto a board that's right inside of a SCART connector. Obviously, that would require a custom case. So if people were really interested in this project, I really think they should break it out into different options for people, because some people listening right now are probably shaking their heads going, what the heck does it matter? You could use a pass-through cable for this. While other people are probably going, if I had that for my setup, I'd be able to do this a lot easier or that a lot easier. So hopefully somebody will redesign this to fit right into a SCART head so we could have that version of it. Maybe just RCA ports and a VGA port kind of sticking out from different angles so you could connect it that way. And maybe even just a passive version so you don't need to worry about power at all. But I'll get one of these things in and I'll try it in different scenarios, see if power really is required for things like using the Mister's pass-through, or even things like the RetroTINK 2X or RetroTINK Ultimate's pass-through, that type of stuff. So I'll definitely give it a shot and see, but I just think that Mike laid out the groundwork for adapters that could be repurposed through this open source design, and we could make stuff that fits every scenario. Also doing low volumes of stuff like this, meaning you could probably have the parts made and hand build 20 or 30 of each and just keep them in stock. And they're not going to be big sellers, but they're things that'll fill absolute needs. Another thing that Mike wanted to release was a version of this that also breaks out S-video and composite. Now, this has a very, very specific use, which I think is awesome. This is for stuff like the Mister, or I guess even for anybody going from HDMI to VGA. This will break those signals out to not only pass through RGBS, but also convert them to composite and S-video. So this could be another device that allows you to do stuff like take that CPSHDMI kit and pump it through that converter out to S-video, so you could now use it on any consumer grade TV with an S-video input. So this one I do seem to think would be better in a case style like the rest of the RetroTINK products. But I guess the more important thing to worry about, like I said before, is just that Mike laid the groundwork for this, and now it's up to us to take it and do what we want with it. So I'll definitely do some testing as soon as I can get these in, and then maybe we could go from there. I'll post my results, and we can make different versions of this stuff to fit different scenarios and different setups. But yeah, thanks very much to Mike for doing this. This absolutely fills a couple of different needs, and hopefully we could tweak it even further to take it to pretty much take care of any kind of RGB HV to RGBS conversions. The SMS Power forums recently uncovered a Sega Master System traffic safety game that was previously unreleased. I guess a while back somebody had found one of these but decided not to share what was on any of these kits or any of the ROMs from it, but somebody recently just did purchase this and was able to dump the ROM. There's even some footage from it being shown quite a while back at a traffic safety course on a giant awesome looking CRT in Japan. But stuff like this was made where people were taking game consoles, and adding educational stuff to them. I think we talked last year about Famicom games that were made for similar purposes that were recently dumped as well. And it's really awesome to preserve this weird piece of history. I don't think many people are going to sit there and really play this game quite often, but it's awesome to see. And I think it's really great that whoever got this version of the ROM was able to dump it and give it away. Everybody has their own opinions on that. A lot of people that I know and respect think that you're allowed to do anything you want with whatever it is that you buy, and no one should tell you differently. I happen to think that if you have something that's unreleased and you could share it with the world, that it's the right thing to do, especially because that rare prototype you own is still going to be an amazing rare prototype. It's not going to change how cool that is, but you still also get to share what's on that prototype with everybody else. There's, of course, people that are only in this for cash, and they're afraid that's going to make their prototype lose money. And you know what? That's life. That's fair. There's nothing you could do about anything like that. So hopefully more people that are lovers of games and less people that are resellers start to find these things and dump them exactly like we've seen here. So thanks to everybody involved with that. That was pretty cool. Some hidden games as well as alternate version games were found on the PC Engine Mini, which is the small emulation box that was started to be released in Japan and then was delayed throughout the rest of the world, at least the TurboGrafx and the Core Graphics versions, due to everything that's going on. And it's pretty interesting what people found. First, if you hold down the select button on the controller while you choose a title, you could have alternate versions of Gradius, Fantasy Zone, and Shoulder Blade. And also you could access the game Twin B by highlighting a different game, pressing select 3 times, and then once you hear a chime, press run. So that's kind of neat. And also you could access Force Gear Caravan by highlighting the same game and then press select 2 times and then hit run. So I'm not really sure why these are hidden and not just included. I'm not sure if there's too much of a story that goes behind it, but it's just kind of neat. It's kind of a cool bonus. I'm sure these things will get hacked and you'll be able to put all the ROMs into it as well. I'm also sure they're equal to or lesser than the Genesis Mini and the NES Classic, which means they're absolutely great for people that just want to experience the games, but for people that are hardcore gamers that want zero lag, perfectly accurate solutions, these probably aren't for you. My take on these classic consoles have always been the same, though. I really love all of the mini consoles. If I had the money and the space to, I would have bought all of them and just had them displayed on my shelf somewhere and just enjoyed them. And the point that I always try to make is especially when it comes to TurboGrafx, if you just want to experience the games and you don't want to mess with original hardware, which or it's liable to require a cap replacement or at the very least jailbreak work and all that stuff, buying these things are a very easy way to just play through some of the library and a great way to get people started. So while I discourage hardcore gamers from playing them, I absolutely encourage everybody in the scene who's just starting to get into this stuff to use these, because very often people start playing these and go, oh, that's all I needed, whereas other people start playing them and go, that's great, give me more. How do I get it better? How do I get it on original controllers? How could I use my Hue cards? So they're a good gateway drug, if you will. Well, that's it for this week. I hope everybody's staying safe and staying healthy. There's hopefully still going to be some cool announcements in the next couple of months. I'm just not really sure what's going to be affected by everything else that's going on. I will probably list a bunch of stuff on eBay just for things that I've already upgraded but held on to the originals, or I need to upgrade soon. So if you were looking for some cool tech equipment, maybe take a look at the eBay store and see if anything up there is for you. If not, totally cool. I'll just leave them up there till they sell. Luckily, I'm not in a position where I'm like selling stuff off because I need to. It's just I don't have any space at all in my apartment, and anything that's extra should really go to free up space for other things. So anyway, check that out if you're interested. Thanks so much to everybody that watches, listens, participates nightly in the comments and all that stuff. I do really enjoy reading through the comments every week and seeing people's different opinions on stuff. So thanks very much for all that, and I'll see you all next week.